André Wessels was born in Durban, 1956. He's a senior professor emeritus in the Department of History at the University of the Free State, Bloemfontein. Professor Wessels' field of interest and research include military history, in particular the history of the Anglo-Boer War and the South African National Defence Force, with special reference to the South African Navy and its predecessors. He is the author, co-author, or editor of, I added at 10 books, it's now 11 books, and author or co-author of more than 120 academic articles. He has also published several articles and books and has written approximately 150 book reviews, as well as many articles of more popular nature for newspapers and magazines. He has delivered many papers at conferences in several countries, has been a guest lecturer at a number of universities in South Africa and abroad, and has been the guest of several foreign navies. Professor Wessels, it's my honor to give the floor to you, and I'm looking forward to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Admiral Robert Simpson Anderson, who, as far as I know, is the newly appointed Honorary President of the National Heritage Trust. Other members of the Naval Heritage Trust, including the Chairperson, Mr. Mike Bosasa, ladies and gentlemen. It is a very long road by land and quite a distance by sea from Maiden Wharf in Durban to Simonstown and the South African Naval Museum. My journey in this regard started around 1962, when as a 5 or 6 year old preschool boy I accompanied my late father on a visit to 2 or 3 visiting British warships. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the names of the ships. I didn't have a notebook with me at that stage. The first warships that I visited and which I can remember by name were the new Type 12 frigates, SAS President Kruger and SAS President Steyn, the old Loch-class frigate SAS Transvaal, and the fleet minesweeper used as a training ship SAS Pietermaritzburg that visited Durban in December 1964, together with the Royal Navy's frigate HMS Jaguar. I was 8 years old. In the course of the rest of the 1960s and early 1970s, I went on board South African, British, French and Italian warships until the policies of the then government led to increasing isolation and the end of foreign flag showing and other visits to South African ports, and eventually a mandatory United Nations arms embargo. With the exception of visits to visiting Taiwanese warships in the 1980s, I had to rely on books and magazines to come to know more about foreign warships, foreign navies, while continuing to visit South African warships and submarines if and when possible. I treasure my file full of visitor brochures received when going on board these ships, including the one I received on board the ill-fated SAS President Kruger. In the course of many years, I followed as best I could naval and also other military developments, both in South Africa and in the wider world. In the meantime, I completed my school education in Durban, the city of my birth. After completing my university studies, working as a teacher and then as a researcher at the Human Sciences Research Council, I joined the staff of the University of the Free State in 1988. My research focused on the history of the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 to 1902, but then one day I thought, what are the chances that I could turn my passion for naval history, in other words, my hobby, into another field of academic research? On a personal level, the rest is history for me. I never thought that I would ever introduce a book, my book, on the history of South Africa's naval forces from 1922 to 2022, here in Simonstown and at the Naval Museum. A museum where I have, since it was established, spent many weeks of my life doing research and also visiting again and again. The honour bestowed upon me to have this book launched here on the eve of the South African Navy's 100th anniversary is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. There are too many people I should thank in person, but let me convey a sincere word of thanks, sincere word of appreciation at least to a few of those people who made it all possible. The many present and retired members of the South African Navy that in the course of many years shared their reminiscences with me and or who provided me with kind assistance. In section 7 of the source list of my book, I mention at least some of these people by name. In particular, Admiral Robert Simpson Anderson, together with his wife Keisha, are here this evening. Thank you very much, Admiral. The late Admiral Chris Bennett, and then also Admiral Arno Zetterlund, Commander Mac Bissett, and Commander Leon Steyn, all three who are also present here this evening. I would especially like to thank Arno Zetterlund and Commander Leon Steyn, in particular for their invaluable comments with regard to the manuscript of my book. Thank you also, Commander Steyn and Warrant Officer David Harrison, for providing the photographs that were published in the book. And there are also other people who provided photographs in that regard. To my publisher, Johan Coetzee from Naledi, thank you for believing in my manuscript, and for the rest of the Naledi team, namely Ronnie Taylor, who did the layout and design, who unfortunately is ill and cannot be here this evening, Karen Kronier, who designed the cover, Tasia Swart for various tasks, and thank you also Johan, Karen, and Sandra for being here this evening, being present here this evening. Thank you, Commander Steyn and your team for organizing the book launch in collaboration with Naledi and for the wonderful venue. Thank you to members of the South African Navy Band Ensemble who provided music and apparently will still provide music later on. Thank you to each and every one of you who are present here this evening. You are honoring me with your attendance. Last but not least, for all the inspiration and motivation provided by her, as well as for her kind assistance, I wish to thank my wife, Danila, who is also here this evening, together with two of my stepdaughters, Lillian and Danilda, and also Ryan, a friend of ours. Thank you very much for making this evening very special for me. Ladies and gentlemen, although the history of the Navy of our democratic New South Africa stretches from 1994 to the present day, what has been achieved since 1994, and there have been many achievements, was built to a lesser or greater extent on what our naval forces have done since 1922. In my book, I have endeavoured to provide an overview, plus where possible an analysis, even if it's very briefly, of a century of South African naval history. My book consists of 9 chapters as well as 4 appendices. I point out that in the course of the first century of its existence, South Africa's naval forces have on several occasions undergone a process of transformation. The South African Naval Service was established on the 1st of April 1922 as a small coastal force with only 1 survey ship and 2 minesweeping trawlers. And from 1934 to 1939, as most of us know, this naval service existed only as a nominal naval force with no ships. Chapter 2 deals with the Second World War and its aftermath. I point out that the South African Naval Service became the Seaward Defence Force in 1939, which in turn was transformed in 1942 to become the South African Naval Forces, SANF. In the course of the Second World War, South Africa's naval forces made a small but nevertheless contribution, a noteworthy contribution towards the Allied war effort, while South Africans serving in the Royal Navy saw action in all the war zones. The SANF was renamed South African Navy in 1951. But to go back a few years, at first the SANF was downsized in the wake of World War II, but expanded from 1947 onwards, with no fewer than 18 new or second-hand ships acquired in the course of 1950s, as I explain in Chapter 3. It thus became a small blue water navy capable of guarding this Cape Sea route in the interest of South Africa and the West. The Navy continued to expand and became stronger in the course of the 1960s and 1970s, acquiring inter alia new frigates and a replenishment ship, establishing a submarine service and entering the missile age thanks to the acquisition of missile-carrying strike craft. Topics I discuss in chapters 4 and 5. For several decades, the Navy was the guardian of the Cape Sea route, even though in its heyday it could only to a lesser extent defend the sea route on its own. But the National Party's policy of separate development, apartheid, led to ever-growing international isolation, which also negatively impacted the Navy. Naval contact with other countries was limited, and it became impossible to order new ships and submarines from abroad. By 1985 and until around about 2006, the Navy, as we know, was reduced to a small ship Navy that concentrated on the defence of South Africa's harbours and coasts, albeit that the Navy did play an important role in the war for Southern Africa, which included the so-called border war, especially in the years 1975 to 1988. The run-up to and dawn of a new, truly democratic South Africa in 1994 created new opportunities for the Navy, which I discuss in chapters 6, 7 and 8. Thanks to the commissioning of 4 new frigates and 3 new submarines from 2006 to 2008. And the Navy regained its blue water status and enhanced its power. In the light of page limitations, it was neither possible to write the full story of each and every incident, cruise, etc. that is referred to in this history of the South Africa's naval forces in the course of a century, nor was it possible to give an in-depth analysis of the role played by each and every ship or submarine. However, it is hoped that the study will put on record certain basic facts with regard to South Africa's naval forces, and that the comments and analysis will stimulate debate, that it will honour those Navy personnel of all cultural groups who served on board South Africa's ships and submarines in the course of a century. Most of you present here this evening know much more about these matters that I wrote about. And if I make mistakes, corrections will be most welcome. As we all know, South Africa's naval forces have provided support to other government departments, have taken part in many search and rescue operations as well as humanitarian and other support operations. Navy ships and submarines have also successfully taken part in numerous exercises, from the Durbexes and Capexes and Sanexes of the 1940s to the 1960s, to the new South African Navy's participation in, for example, Atlasur, Ipsamar and Good Hope. In the book, I elaborate on some of these matters. Other achievements of the Navy to which I allude include the fact that at certain crucial times in the history of the South African Navy, its leaders were able to convince the politicians that money had to be allocated to expand and modernize the Navy. For example, the acquisition of additional coastal minesweepers, patrol boats and frigates in accordance with the Simonstown Agreement in the years 1957 to 1964, the acquisition of the Navy's first submarines that were commissioned in 1970-71, missile-carrying strike craft and mine hunters from 1977 to 1986, and then, of course, the new submarines and frigates that were commissioned from 2006 to 2008. The last mentioned acquisitions were not only necessary lifebuoys for the then ailing Navy, but indeed gave it more tools and confidence to fulfill its mandate. Since 1922, South Africa's naval forces have also done excellent survey work along the country's coasts, making it safe for ships to sail along the coasts and to enter and exit the ports. Everything considered, the biggest achievement of South Africa's naval forces since 1922, and in particular since 1988, has been, as far as I'm concerned, and you may differ from me, its diplomatic outreach actions, which I discuss in more details in chapters 6 to 8. The traditional exchange of diplomats between friendly countries, reciprocal visits by heads of states and cabinet ministers, and the holding of summit meetings are not the only means of strengthening relations between countries. Throughout the ages, it has, for example, been the practice of seafaring countries to send warships to one another from time to time, sometimes to take part in joint exercises, but usually to establish better relations or to strengthen ties that already exist. In this regard, our Navy is no exception. I pay special attention in my book to the Navy's diplomatic role. Since the end of the Second World War, 60 of the country's 68 major warships have conducted approximately 100 flag-showing cruises, visiting more than 100 ports in approximately 50 countries. This has included, for example, in the years 1994 to 1996, when Admiral Robert Simpson Anderson was Chief of the Navy, In other words, in the wake of the establishment of the new Democratic Republic of South Africa, 8 tailor-made flag-showing cruises to at least 29 ports in 23 countries, for the first time showing the flag of the new South Africa and renewing old friendships and establishing new diplomatic and other naval ties. Even in the years 1985 to 2003, when the South African Navy was reduced to a coastal force which primarily consisted of strike craft and mine countermeasures vessels, the Navy was successful in the diplomatic field. In this regard, the fact that the Navy had 2 combat support ships was of great importance. A warship is both a reflection and a projection of the state it represents. The more the Republic of South Africa moved out of diplomatic isolation, the more South Africa needed warships to underpin its diplomatic efforts. The acquisition of 4 new frigates and 3 new submarines boosted the Navy's confidence and provided the Navy with new grey diplomats that would enhance the Navy and South Africa's image abroad. The importance of South Africa's grey diplomats cannot be disputed. They have proved that in times of peace, the Navy's role in support of the state's diplomatic initiatives encompasses a wide range of activities. Of particular importance in this regard has been the role played by the SA Navy in the African context, as well as in the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean Rim areas. In accordance with the South African Navy's core business, namely to fight at sea, its mission, namely to win at sea, and its vision, namely to be unchallenged at sea, it is of the utmost importance that the Republic of South Africa should have a well-equipped, well-balanced, well-trained and disciplined Navy. And yet there are South Africans who challenge the mere existence of a Navy, even of a defence force. There are those who erroneously argue that South Africa is under no military threat. But what about terror groups and other threatening organisations? What about piracy? What about the unstable international situation, especially thanks to super and great power rivalry in the Far East? And then there is the Ukraine. Throughout the ages, the politics and strategy of sea power was and still is of crucial importance for literal countries. And sea power had and still has a profound influence on the history of the world. Many of the events in the history of what is today South Africa were determined by the power struggle between the colonial powers, namely the Netherlands, Britain and France, all 3 seafaring nations, over the control over trade routes, including the strategic Cape Sea route, one of the world's most important seaward choke points. To ensure the free flow of trade around the Cape, a naval presence was and still is very necessary. The development of South Africa's naval forces has to be seen against this background, as I have tried to explain in my book. The South African Navy is neither one of the oldest nor one of the major navies in the world, but it nevertheless has a fascinating and proud history, albeit also a checkered history. I have tried in my book to provide some insight with regard to that history. In the light of the fact that South Africa's naval forces date back to at least the 1st of April 1922, the Navy's centenary tomorrow, 1 April 2022, should be used, ideally, to take stock of the Navy's past, its present state of affairs, and its future. After all, South Africa is, everything taken into consideration, supposed to be a maritime nation. With oceans forming 3 of the Republic of South Africa's borders, the country is thus, geographically speaking, a large peninsula. It has, as we all know, a coastline of approximately 2,800 kilometers and an exclusive economic zone that stretches in 200 nautical miles from the coast into the oceans. Approximately 30,000 ships sail around South Africa annually, including some 13,000 that enter the country's ports. When it is furthermore considered that at least 90% of South Africa's trade flows through the country's harbours, it should be clear why the country should be a maritime nation. But in practice, this is not necessarily the case. How many South Africans know and appreciate the above-mentioned facts? We do, as we are sitting here this evening. But what about so many other South Africans? For most inhabitants, the sea is merely a holiday destination, And many South Africans suffer what could be termed a land rat mentality, as well as from what can be regarded as sea blindness. It is very unfortunate that much of our naval heritage has been lost forever. But this evening we are gathered here in Simonstown at the South African Naval Museum, a museum in an excellent condition and comparable to, for example, naval museums in Australia and New Zealand and elsewhere. This is thanks to the dedicated work by people such as the previous and long-standing officer in charge of SA Naval Museum, Commander Mac Bissett, later Commander Eddie Wessels, Commander Adrian Dutton, and Commander Cara Pratten, and since the 1st of April 2011, Commander Leon Steyn. I salute you for the excellent work that you and your staff have done and are still doing in preserving our naval heritage. Excellent work is also done by the South African Naval Heritage Trust and Concomitant Society with regard to the preservation of South Africa's naval heritage. See, in this regard, as we all know, the Society's Oral History Project, a series of publications, namely the Naval Digest, which I was also privileged enough to receive copies, the latest editions, earlier this evening, several other book publications, as well as many other projects. I know that you will continue with this work in the interest of our Navy and our country. All this work can contribute towards the development of a maritime culture in South Africa. I would also like to mention the excellent work done by the editor and staff of Navy News, a publication that in its own way records the history of our Navy and is thus also an invaluable source of information for anyone doing research on the Navy. If my book, in a small way, can also contribute to more understanding and appreciation with regard to South Africa as a maritime nation and the importance of our Navy, I shall be glad. In my book, I have endeavoured to indicate how, in the years 1922 to 2022, South Africa's naval forces have developed a proud tradition with regard to support and assistance to South Africa and all its inhabitants. The SA Navy must build upon this tradition, and hopefully all South Africans will appreciate and support their Navy. After all, the South African Navy has indeed been transformed into a Navy of and for the people of South Africa. My best wishes accompany the South African Navy and all who have served in the past and still serve in this 100-year-old naval force. Thank you once again for being present here this evening, and thank you for your kind attention. I sincerely appreciate it.
Professor Wessels, if I might start off with a question. You mentioned Navy News. As a researcher and as a person that conducts research, you need to start somewhere. How easy or how difficult is it? You specialized in the Navy's history. Originally I came from the Air Force, so I think it's a loaded question. Easy, difficult if you compare to the Air Force or any Army unit, current SANDF unit. Is it to do research on the South African Navy? Given what you have available to you?
Yeah. Well, as a person, could I perhaps just also say those who know me will know that I'm a very kind and peaceful person, but I have a very strange and profound interest in military matters. But I'm not a hawk, I'm not a warmonger. So I'm also a jack of all trades and master of none, but I try to focus here and there, and the Navy is one of my focus areas. But I have a very broad interest in in military matters in general. So once again, I didn't comment on all these things because the road that I've travelled from Maiden Wharf also included many other sub-roads that I've been on. Where do you generate interest and where does a researcher start? More often than not, it is literally by looking at the publications of the Defence Force. So, I mean, I grew up with Paratus, for example, and I mean, fascinating articles. And then, in due course, I came across Navy News, and then Ad Astra, and So the one thing led to the other. Now, I don't think that Mr. Gert Witbooi is here this evening, but in his absence, and obviously all the other editors before him and all the other people who have been involved on the editorial board. And I'm saying, of course, people will say I'm biased, perhaps I am, but I do not think, I'm not putting on my real academic hat, the Navy News is the best military journal in South Africa. It's an excellent publication, and it does provide a basic starting point for basic naval research, which then will lead you obviously to books and then to archival work. I don't know whether I've answered the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that is why it is so important that these publications will continue. South African SA Soldier is still an important source of information, albeit, okay, with all due respect, South African National Defence Force, but SA Soldier, and the Navy is sometimes, you know, something almost as an appendix. But yes, hopefully these journals will continue to be published.
That concludes that. Now, Johan, that's now your big moment.
Thank you, Leon, for the privilege and the honor to be here tonight for us as a publishing house. The reason for that 30 seconds is I am from Gansbaai. We have the sea in common with you, but English is not our primary language. So indeed, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, André has spoken on RSG recently for 3 consecutive weeks now, André. And I think this is such a great opportunity to make people aware, even in the Afrikaans community, on RSG, about what you guys are doing, about this huge celebration of the 100th year of the SA Navy. So, André, from our side as a publishing house, it is indeed a great privilege to be involved in this project. Naledi has published recently a few important books on SA interest. We have last year published the biography of Desmond Tutu by Michael Battle, who is a professor in America, and which was for us a great opportunity to be involved in such a significant person's life. Also Leon Wessels, Encountering Apartheid's Ghosts, a book on the political views of Leon in South Africa last year. And this is for us a great privilege, André. You have said that you are not a warrior and not a hawk, but I have experienced a different André as an author. Sandra, who is with me, is also an ex-Bloemfontein person, and when I asked her about Leon, and she said no, she knows him very well, and it was not very, when she said he's a very meticulous researcher, I could agree with that wholeheartedly. André is not an easy author, but it's such an honor to be involved, André, with you, who is meticulous in everything that you do, and for us as a publisher, this was a great and rewarding experience. So indeed, thank you for this opportunity also, Leon, all you people, to be involved with this significant publication, and we're looking forward, André, to a few marks ahead on this road with you. So indeed, and I must say, it is going very well with the sales and the interest in the books, also from the retail side. And I think it is important to the campaigning that has been done so far to make people aware of this significant work. So indeed, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity.